My first aha moment with Coro was on selection day. It was, I'd never heard of Coro when I had applied, and during selection day, I just had a blast with all the strategy and figuring out how to group dynamics and responding to questions in real time. And in fact, on that day, one of the judges, I'm not sure if I should say this, you can edit this part out, he said, Omar, I think you're full of it. I think you're full of BS. And I was like, look, I've never heard of Coro. I'm having a great time. If this works, awesome. If not, hey, it was good. And he had just been bird dogging me all day. And then he came up afterwards and he was like, you were phenomenal. And so I liked that dynamic of a challenge. And interestingly, I think 4 or 5 people in my group got in. And so we really created a group team effort. At the time, I was teaching in East Palo Alto. And so I had a bunch of classroom team building exercises that we were doing. And I think in some ways that helped kind of make sure that we were playing well together. I mean, Coro has been part of my life ever since I was in the program. From my first job after Coro, I worked with Rich Lichtenstein at Marathon Communications. Spent the next few years there. Rich and others wrote letters of recommendation for when I got into Harvard and studied public policy and urban planning. I spent a few years back east, and when I came back to LA, John Cabara at the California Community Foundation, Robin Kramer, and multiple mayors. There's always been an incredible network of people that care about Los Angeles that I've always been able to connect with.
So you got like a group of people like looking out for you.
Absolutely. I
That's
think
awesome.
Coro is definitely a family feel to it. Fondest memories. One of my fondest memories of the Coro experience was getting to work with John Perez, who at the time was the executive director of the United Food and Commercial Workers State Council. And I was fortunate to have 3 of my assignments with him. So I got to work on a political campaign, a labor issue, and I think a special project. And he just asked a million questions. And I just enjoyed being in an environment where that level of critical thinking, but to real world issues, was so prevalent. I remember I was with Andrew Baldonado, and he said, what do you want out of your Coro experience? And I said, unfettered access. I said, okay, here you go. And he just brought me into every single meeting he was in. And that just gave me an opportunity to really see the world from a lot of different points of view. And that, I think, is one of the great things about Coro, is that you get to really see the world from multiple points of view and really understand that there's lots of ways to understand a situation, and it is through the messiness of communication that we actually try to figure out how to solve public problems. Coro is a leadership program. I think that one of the key words that we talked a lot about when I was a Coro fellow was stewardship. That leadership is not just management. It's not about status quo. That if we're not figuring out how to make improvements and to be better stewards, then we're probably not doing enough. Paulo Freire, who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, said that if we're not on a path of humanization, then we're on a path of dehumanization. And I think that if we want to create a better society and a better place, then we figure out how to constantly be improving. And that, to me, is stewardship. And that's what I learned at Coro. I think the potential of Coro is how to continue to be innovative in a space that it helped pioneer 50 years ago. It was the only leadership program probably 50 years ago. Now, everybody has a leadership program. And so how do you lead among leaders? And I think that answering that question really, and how, whether you want to have your impact locally or nationally, are you trying to have your impact on the field of leadership, or are you actually trying to have an impact in the community that you're in? And I think the challenge of having a lot of smart people that are going to have a lot of different opinions. But I think one of the challenges of legacy organizations is how do they transcend their own legacies. And sometimes that means departing from what they've done. And that is not an easy thing to do when you've built an incredible group of people that have been part of something for a very long time. And so I think then the question becomes, how does Coro embrace continuity and change? The need for leadership is as important today as it ever was. I think that in some ways, if you look at our own presidential elections, it can become very easy to be cynical. And I think that what we really need to do is figure out, how do we actually solve problems? How do we actually continue to roll up our sleeves and engage people in the messiness of democracy? I think that it could be seen as we've got too much politics, and I would argue that we don't have enough politics. We've chosen a society that has decided to figure out how to solve its problems through a very deliberative and messy democratic process. That it wasn't just about who had the power at one given moment that can make sweeping change. It was about incremental change, which meant compromise. And compromise has become seen as some dirty word. And I think that, campaigning, I think Obama said, is poetry, but governance is prose. And I think we have to be comfortable with balancing the ideals that we have as a country with the reality that what makes us work well is that we're pluralistic, that we can handle people that are both Christian and Muslim and agnostic and atheist, and that we all have a right and a freedom to live to our best abilities in this country in a way that is safe and responsible, and ultimately that we are stewards of the country that we're in.